Welcome back to the Band Guide, where we use GarageBand to make professional sounding music. I'm your band guy, Colin, and this video we're going to be talking about what is currently a completely free plugin that is incredible. This is Slate Digital's Fresh Air plugin, and I'm really excited about it. At the time that I'm recording this video, you can download it completely free. I'll link to it in the description below. Go check it out this second and see if it's still free, and download it immediately. Don't even think about it. It is awesome. You should have this plugin. If it costs, listen to this video, check out all the examples, and see if you think it's worth it. Personally, I would probably buy this plugin. I think it sounds really incredible. So this plugin is essentially an exciter. So an exciter, their analogy is basically it's like taking a blanket off of your speakers. It just brightens everything up in a really clear and natural way. I've personally never really enjoyed exciters. I often find that they sound really brittle, and this is maybe the first exciter that I've ever heard that I've been excited about. That's kind of funny to say, exciter that I've been excited about, but it's true. This plugin is incredible, and it has a couple different features that make it really usable and really, really simple. If you're not familiar with Slate Digital, they became extremely famous over the years for making amazing sounding analog emulation plugins. So plugins that sound like vintage analog gear. And they do an incredible job at that. I own several of their plugins and they all sound awesome. And this plugin is actually one of those as well. It doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like vintage gear, but this is emulating some old analog exciters and it sounds great. So go grab it completely free. In this video, we're going to be going over all the features in this plugin, and then we're going to run through some audio examples so you can really hear what it sounds like, what this thing can do. And then at the end, I'm going to run through how I would use this plugin in a mix. Let's dive in and see what this plugin can do. So this example here, this is basically just a static mix. This is not a full mix. I wanted you to really be able to hear what this plugin could do on basically just raw tracks. It's really incredible. So I'm going to play a little bit with it on and then I'll bypass it, and notice it sounds like someone just threw a blanket over your speakers. And then the moment I turn it back on, it sounds like someone ripped that blanket back off. It's incredible. Check it out. That's pretty crazy, right? So the moment you turn it off, it just is like someone threw a blanket on your speakers. The coolest thing about this plugin is that it's incredibly easy to use. So this plugin is basically two knobs. You have a high air knob. This is going to be your really high frequencies, your bright frequencies. And then you have a mid air knob. And then you have a trim knob. So any volume that you might add from these, you can use the trim knob. This is basically output volume to turn it back down so you don't add any volume with this plugin. So you can truly assess if it sounds better to you or if it's just sounding louder. That's really important. And then it has this link. It's not a stereo link, but it's linking these two channels. So once I get a ratio that I like, if I decided I want a little bit less overall, I turn that on and then I could turn this up or down easily. And then it just has a bypass plugin down here. So this is functionally going to be the same as your bypass button up here. So let's go ahead and dive into each individual knob, and I'll kind of exaggerate them so you can really hear what they're doing on this mix. So we'll start with this high sparkle knob. I'm going to turn it down to 0, and I'm just going to turn it up so you can really hear what it's doing. Pretty cool, right? So it gets pretty extreme there at the top, but you just dial in a little bit of that and you add that little bit of upper brightness and it sounds really, really good and really natural. Let's check out this mid-air knob. Now I'm really excited about this because this frequency range is really important for a professional sounding mix, and I find that it's a little bit harder to dial in than the upper frequencies. It's easier for me to get the upper frequencies, the brightness that I want up there, but this medium air area I find harder. So listen to what this knob itself sounds like. So it's a little bit more of a presence knob. You really hear that snare cut through a little bit more. Everything just cuts through a little bit more when you dial that knob up. So that's really, really cool. Let's put this back roughly where we had it at the beginning. And then let's dial a little bit in on some individual sources. So let's go back. I think I was around there maybe. Let's go back and go on to a lead vocal here. And we're just going to add an instance of it. And check this out. So we'll solo this vocal. This is what it sounds like on its own. I'm really starting over. Oh yeah, that presence really helps that vocal a lot. And this just adds like the detail at the top of that vocal. I'm really starting over. That's pretty cool, right? So again, we're probably adding a little bit of volume. So after you set that, you'd want to dial the volume back just a little bit, listen to it and try to balance that. But that just adds a little bit of that detail, adds a little bit of that presence, and it sounds awesome on vocals. So vocals are definitely a main area where I could see myself using this. And I also wanted to show it on an individual snare drum example. So we're going to go up to a snare drum. Now, if you've multi-tracked out your drums like we've talked about, I'll link to it up here. If you multi-tracked out your drums, you could use this just on your individual snare drum, but you could also throw it on your entire drummer track if you wanted. So we'll throw one on here. Let's listen to this. And let's see. This is what I'm really excited about, this presence knob, this like the crack of the snare. Dial that up a little bit. And then you could dial up, this is kind of almost like you hear the snare wires. Balance that volume a little bit. That's cool, right? Let's listen in the context of the mix if we notice this when we turn it off. It's subtle, but that snare just cuts through a little bit more as soon as you put this on. It's really, really incredible. This plugin is so cool, and it's so powerful, but so simple. When it comes to how I would actually use this plugin on a mix, first things first is definitely on the master track. The master track is where you shape the overall tone of your mix, and as you heard earlier, this plugin does a really, really good job at shaping the tone of the upper frequencies in your mix. So for me, after I have set up a static mix, I've set all my volume and panning, I would go to the master track and I would put this on after my EQ and compression plugin, but I would actually process it before I've set my EQ or compression. That way I know how much brightness I'm getting from this plugin before I go on to doing the EQ. But I would put it after the EQ and compression on the master track signal chain so that I'm not EQing or compressing this plugin. You don't need to. And then once I've set this on the master track and I've done all my master track processing and I move on to individual channels, I would still start with EQ and compression on all of my individual channels. But then if I really want a little more brightness, or if when I'm EQing, I'm noticing that there's still not enough brightness coming through from these vocals or from that snare drum, if I want to dial up the crack on that snare drum a little bit more and it's not sounding right with compression or EQ, then I would try this plugin after my EQ and compression in that instance too. I would try this plugin to dial up a little bit more of those upper frequencies or dial up the presence with the mid air knob. And I would do it in that order because the master track processing is going to impact all of the channels in your signal. So you're going to be getting a little bit of whatever you set on your master track on the tone of all of your individual signals. But doing it after you've done the EQ and compression on the individual signals, at that point you really know if you want a little bit of this plugin. So don't just blindly throw this on any channel. There's no sense in that. But if you are working on your mix and you really want that snare to cut through a little bit more, that vocal to have a little more brightness, and you're not getting it the way you want with EQ, try throwing this plugin on. It's going to do wonders in your mix. It's super powerful. The last tip that I would give is be a little more conservative than you might want to be. So this plugin starts to sound really, really good once you're hitting 30, 40, 50, 60, 70%, but it's kind of starting to sound a little unnatural. So my biggest recommendation is to dial it back. Set it where it's sounding really good and then just scale it back a little bit, maybe even as much as half. So if it sounds really, really good at 60, try anywhere between 30 and 60 and see if there's something a little bit more conservative. That's going to help it sound a little bit more natural. Especially if you've been mixing in your session for a while, your ears are going to be fatigued a little bit. And when you do something like this that so drastically changes the tone, it's going to be exciting. So you might want to keep it, but you want to set it a little bit more conservatively to sound natural, sound professional. Now, if you're watching this and you're saying, well, I don't know what a static mix, I don't know where EQ and compression, all these things fit together, I've put together something to help you out. I've put together a 6-step checklist to a pro mix in GarageBand. Just walks through the 6 steps that you need to do a professional sounding mix in GarageBand. It's completely free from the link in the description below. So go download that. Go download this plugin. It's awesome, especially while you can get it free. But also, even when it's paid, it's a really incredibly powerful plugin. If this video is helpful for you, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video.
One thing